It happened again. A thunderous crunch outside my front door shattered the morning silence, followed by the unmistakable screech of tires peeling off down the street. My heart jumped as I dropped my coffee and sprinted toward the porch. I already knew what I'd find before I even saw it. There it was, my poor mailbox, shattered into splinters, lying face down in a bed of crushed tulips, mangled like a crime scene. Again, I stood at the edge of my lawn, fists clenched, staring down the road at the fading silhouette of a white SUV barreling away, trailing dust like a hit-and-run getaway car. And behind the wheel, Nancy, laughing. I caught a flash of her round face through the window, eyes squinting with glee, mouth wide open in a scream of laughter. In the passenger seat, her twin sister Barbara was filming it on her phone like it was some kind of reality show prank. That was the third time in 2 months. I knelt beside the ruins of what used to be a sturdy, red-painted mailbox inside, lifting up a crushed piece of metal that used to hold my street number. One of the screws was still hot, though it smelled like burnt paint and gasoline. A thin trail of tire rubber stretched diagonally across my lawn like a scar. They didn't even try to hide it. The Karens, Nancy and Barbara, had declared war, and I was the poor idiot who thought I could win it with civility. When the twins moved into the neighborhood 6 months ago, things went downhill fast. They were impossible to ignore, too loud, florally dressed hurricanes of entitlement in their early 40s, identical in every inconvenient way. Both were obese, always sweating, and constantly wheezing when they walked. But they made up for their lack of mobility with sheer vocal firepower. Every neighbor heard them before they saw them. Matching floral sundresses, a cloud of perfume that smelled like melted cherries and sunscreen, and a knack for turning minor inconveniences into full-blown drama. Their SUV, a massive, obnoxiously lifted white Escalade, was the center of their world. They named it the Queen Barge. They treated it like royalty and drove it like a wrecking ball. My mailbox was their favorite victim. It started as what they called an accident. That was the first time. A light bump that split the post but left the box hanging on. I fixed it without complaint. Everyone deserves one mistake, right? Then came the second time. It wasn't subtle. They plowed right through it and kept going. I caught Barbara outside later that day, and when I asked about it, she actually laughed. "Maybe don't put it so close to the road," she said with a condescending smile, sipping on a Diet Coke like she was doing me a favor. "That's where mailboxes go," I replied, barely restraining my sarcasm. "Well, maybe if it was prettier, I'd try not to hit it," she chirped. Ugly things are hard to see. It wasn't just the mailbox. They parked across driveways, blocked trash pickups, and blasted music from their porch until 2 a.m. If you tried to reason with them, they played dumb or doubled down. They called the HOA on people who looked at them wrong, and once accused my elderly neighbor of threatening them because he asked them to turn down their speakers. But the mailbox, that was personal. That was mine. After incident number 2, I went to the HOA. Their response? "We'll look into it." They never did. Then I filed a police report, and the officer told me unless I had clear evidence they were doing it intentionally, it was just a civil matter. No charges. No consequences. Meanwhile, my mailbox looked like it had been chewed by a grizzly bear. I installed a camera. Motion activated, wide angle. The whole setup was expensive, but I needed proof. And it didn't take long. 2 weeks later, at 7:13 a.m., it happened. I watched it live from my phone. Nancy lined up her SUV from halfway up the street and sped up like she was playing Grand Theft Auto. She turned the wheels slightly, hit the curb with a bounce, and rammed the mailbox dead center. The wooden post exploded on impact. Splinters flew. Barbara was laughing so hard she dropped her iced coffee in her lap. They didn't even stop. Just kept driving. I saved the footage and showed it to the HOA again. Their response? "We'd prefer neighbors to handle these matters among themselves." I called the police. They said, "Still no criminal intent. Could be an accident." An accident caught on video? With laughter? I confronted them the next day. They were unloading groceries, 3 bags each, overflowing with frozen dinners and sugary snacks. Nancy was wearing a lime green dress with pink roses. Barbara had sunflowers. I walked across the street, holding a printed frame of the video. You want to explain this? Nancy barely glanced at it. Photoshop. It's a video. Deep fake. Barbara chimed in, not even looking up. You know this is harassment, right? I said. You're targeting my property. Nancy stepped forward, her breath smelling like peanut butter crackers. You put your mailbox too close to the street. You're begging for someone to hit it. It's exactly where the city placed it when I moved in. Then the city's dumb, Barbara added, or maybe you're just trying to scam us for insurance money. I blinked. I haven't asked you for a dime. Nancy smirked. Yet, I stared at them, feeling my jaw lock. Their smugness was like a wall you couldn't punch through. They were playing some twisted game, and no authority cared enough to stop them. That night, I sat in my garage staring at the pile of wood that used to be my mailbox. The streetlights outside cast a dull yellow glow across the driveway. Crickets chirped. Somewhere, a dog barked once and fell silent. I wasn't even angry anymore. Just tired. Tired of playing defense. Tired of fixing what they destroyed. Tired of their voices, their faces, their dresses, their smug little laughs. The only thing louder than their SUV was their sense of impunity. I opened my laptop and started searching. Indestructible mailbox. The results were eye-opening. Turns out rural folks have been building anti-theft, anti-smash mailboxes for years. Steel posts, concrete cores, armor plating. Some even embedded theirs into boulders or mounted them on 200-pound bases. There were entire forums dedicated to mailbox revenge. I read through dozens of posts, watching homemade videos of mailboxes wrecking cars like medieval traps. One photo showed a steel mailbox with the caption, "They hit me once. Never again." That was the spark. I stood up, cracked my neck, and started jotting down plans. No more wood. No more nails. No more playing nice. I was going to build a monument. Something immovable. Something invincible. Something that would not only survive, but punish. Because if the twins were going to keep playing bumper cars with my property, I figured it was time to stop being a target and start being a trap. They wanted war? Fine. War it is. They had no idea what was coming. 2 days after the last hit and run, I began building. I cleared the garage, pulled on a pair of leather gloves, and got to work like a man on a mission. No more nails and screws. No more wooden posts that snapped like pretzel sticks. This time it would be steel, concrete, and unflinching resolve. I didn't just want a mailbox. I wanted a fortress. A statement. A silent warning embedded in the earth. I started with a 4-inch diameter steel pipe 6 feet long, 3 of which would be buried in reinforced concrete. I sourced the materials from a local salvage yard and an old ranch supply store, people who had stories of their own about vandals and mailbox smashers. One guy laughed when I told him what I was building. You want that sucker to break bumpers? Fill it with rebar, weld it tight, and bury it in 200 pounds of concrete. Ain't nobody walking away clean after that. So I did exactly that. Welding sparks hissed and snapped as I pieced it together. The pipe alone weighed more than a full-grown man. I drilled it into a square steel base, then filled it with sand and rebar and sealed it shut. The mailbox I chose looked ordinary from the outside, black aluminum with a shiny chrome flag, but underneath, it was bolted to a reinforced plate and backed by a half-inch of solid steel. It didn't just look unassuming. It was bait. I poured the concrete at midnight, digging deep, setting the base, making sure every angle was precise. The moon overhead cast a dull silver glow across my lawn as I smoothed the final layer, sweat dripping from my forehead. My arms ached, my knees throbbed, but I smiled for the first time in weeks. I even whistled. By morning, it stood silent and solid. You wouldn't know it was a trap unless you looked beneath the surface. And that was the point. Around 9 a.m., I saw them. Nancy and Barbara waddled out of their house, their matching floral dresses fluttering in the breeze like a couple of pastel flags announcing doom. Today's theme was daisies. Nancy carried a large purse that bulged like it was stuffed with snacks, and Barbara had her phone up, filming as always. Their SUV, the Queen Barge, sat gleaming in their driveway, the hood reflecting the sun like a spotlight. Barbara squinted across the street, spotting the new mailbox. He put up another one, she muttered loudly enough for me to hear. Nancy shielded her eyes. Ugh, it's hideous. You think it'll last a week? Barbara asked with a laugh. Try an hour, Nancy replied, pulling out her keys. I didn't move. I stayed in my window, sipping coffee, pretending not to watch. But my pulse was racing. This was it. The moment I'd built for. My trap was set. And now, all I had to do was wait. They didn't strike that day. Or the next. Days turned into a week, and still nothing. Maybe they were being cautious. Maybe they sensed the change in energy, like the mailbox was daring them, like it was more than just wood and screws this time. Or maybe, just maybe, they were planning something bigger. Then came the morning I'll never forget. It was 6:42 a.m., a quiet Tuesday. I was standing at the sink pouring water into my kettle when I heard it, a low growl of an engine accelerating. Tires squealing. The unmistakable sound of someone revving up for an impact. I dropped the kettle and ran to the front window. The Queen barge was barreling down the street, straight toward my mailbox. Nancy was driving, hunched over the wheel like a deranged NASCAR driver. Barbara was beside her, screaming something I couldn't hear. Her phone pointed forward. Then came the moment of impact. A sickening crack rang out, followed by a sharp metallic clang, and the screech of steel colliding with something far more solid than expected. The SUV didn't bounce off, it recoiled. The front bumper folded like cardboard. The hood crumpled. The front right tire exploded. Steam hissed from the radiator as the entire vehicle shuddered and came to a dead stop in the middle of my lawn. Nancy screamed. Barbara screamed louder. Smoke poured out from under the hood, curling into the morning sky like a distress flare. The Queen barge was dead. My mailbox? Still standing. Untouched. Not even a scratch. I stepped out slowly, phone in hand, recording. Nancy stumbled out of the driver's seat, holding her arm. Her face was twisted in pain and disbelief. Her daisy dress was torn at the shoulder, streaked with something brown, maybe spilled coffee, maybe blood. Barbara followed, limping slightly, clutching her phone like it was a life preserver. You, Nancy shrieked, pointing at me. You sabotaged us. I raised an eyebrow. You mean I put up a mailbox on my own property? You made it out of metal. Barbara spat. You can't do that. That's illegal. Actually, it's well within code, I said, stepping closer. And I have permits. Want to see them? Nancy turned red. You're going to pay for this. You hit my property. On camera. Again, I said, holding up my phone. But now, with a real mailbox. You destroyed your car. Not me. Within 10 minutes, a police cruiser pulled up. I'd already called them. The officer stepped out, and I could barely suppress a grin when I recognized him. Officer Ramirez. The same guy who told me mailbox damage was a civil issue. He walked over, looked at the wrecked SUV, then at the intact mailbox. Same mailbox again? He asked. New one, I said. Reinforced. Legal. Nancy stormed up to him, her mascara running, face glistening with sweat. This man put up a weapon on his lawn. Look what it did to my car. Ramirez glanced at the footage on my phone, lips twitching. Looks like you drove straight into it. He built it to cause damage. Ma'am, he replied, mailboxes have to withstand weather and accidents. This one is city approved. You drove onto his lawn and struck it intentionally. Again. Nancy opened her mouth, but no words came out. She looked like a balloon with a slow leak, deflating by the second. Barbara waddled up beside her. Are you going to arrest him? For what? Having a mailbox. Ramirez asked. Barbara stammered. He made us look stupid. That's not a crime, he said with a smirk. Ramirez took notes, filed a report, and left them with the damage. But the real blow came a few hours later when Nancy's insurance company called. I'd emailed them the footage. They denied her claim. Intentional collision, the agent said. Not covered. You're liable for repairs. $7,000 in damages. And that was just the start. Barbara tried to spin the story online, posting a heavily edited video blaming me for vehicular sabotage. But my video, high-res, uncut, crystal clear, hit Reddit and exploded. Within 24 hours, it had 500,000 views. Karen twins versus Mailbox boss, they called it. Memes flooded in. Someone even made a remix using the footage with dubstep music. My mailbox became a symbol. People from all over started commenting things like, "This man is a hero," and "Steal justice." Nancy and Barbara were furious. They stopped driving the Queen barge. Not because they didn't want to, because it was totaled. Parked sideways in their driveway like a giant, defeated animal, one headlight dangling like a black eye. But even after that, I knew it wasn't over. The twins didn't retreat. They regrouped. For the next few days, they stayed quiet, unusually so. Their porch was empty. No screaming, no music. They vanished like a storm that had gone out to sea. That's when I knew they were planning something. They'd lost the car. They'd lost their pride. And now they wanted revenge. I caught glimpses of them peering through their blinds. They stopped talking to neighbors. They started whispering, plotting. One evening, as I stood watering my lawn, Barbara stepped outside and stared directly at me. She didn't say a word, just smiled. A slow, unsettling smile that didn't match her eyes. I didn't flinch. I smiled right back. Because this time, I was ready. They started with trash. Little things at first, empty soda cans tossed into my yard, crushed potato chip bags stuffed behind my hedges, candy wrappers caught in the blades of my mower. At first, I thought it might have been a coincidence. A windy day, maybe kids passing by. But then it got worse. A broken jar of pickles smashed at the base of my driveway. A torn garbage bag deliberately dumped near my porch, the stench curling up like a warning. I reviewed the security footage. There they were, Nancy and Barbara, sneaking across the street at night in bathrobes and slippers, Barbara dragging the trash bag like it was a dead body, Nancy whispering orders like some deranged general of petty sabotage. It would have been comical if it weren't so disgusting. And it wasn't just the garbage. The next morning, I found barbecue sauce smeared across the side of my indestructible mailbox. Thick, gloppy streaks of red-brown gunk dripping like blood from a butchered animal. It reeked in the summer heat. Ants swarmed. Flies buzzed. I stood there, fists clenched, watching as one long streak slowly oozed downward like a greasy insult. I cleaned it off without a word. Not because I was scared, but because I knew I had them. The camera caught every second. That night, I uploaded a new video. Karen's Sisters Strike Again, The Sauce Chronicles. Within hours, it was trending. A split-screen view of Nancy and Barbara sneaking around my yard in the dark, wearing matching robes covered in floral prints. Roses this time. The comment section exploded. Are they okay? Dressing like picnic tables and acting like raccoons? New villain origin unlocked. The neighborhood saw it too. By now, people had chosen sides. And from what I could tell, the Karens were alone on their island. Even their usual gossip partners at the HOA meetings were avoiding them. One neighbor, Ms. Fleming, an 80-year-old widow known for her obsessive gardening, walked past their house and muttered loud enough for me to hear, "Menace in polyester." It was glorious. But of course, they didn't take humiliation lightly. On the fourth day after the video dropped, I found a letter in my mailbox. No stamp, no envelope, just folded notebook paper, stained with something sticky, and written in Barbara's barely legible, looping handwriting. "You'll regret this. You don't know who you're messing with." I smiled when I read it. They were running out of moves. That same afternoon, I received an email from the HOA, a formal complaint. Actually, 3 of them. All from Nancy and Barbara. They accused me of building a weaponized mailbox, maintaining an unsafe yard, and creating a hostile environment through surveillance. I showed up to the HOA meeting armed with a folder the size of a phone book, complete with time-stamped video, printed screenshots, written statements from 2 other neighbors who'd experienced similar harassment from the twins, and a spreadsheet cataloging the dates and times of every known incident. The meeting was held in the community center, where the fluorescent lights flickered and the folding chairs creaked with every shift in weight. Nancy and Barbara arrived late, wearing new matching dresses, this time a horrific orange pattern that looked like someone vomited sunflowers. They plopped into their chairs, arms crossed, faces twisted in permanent frowns. The board members took one look at the evidence and fell silent. One of them, Mr. Linwood, a retired civil engineer and the president of the HOA, removed his glasses slowly and said, "This is extensive." "I've tried everything else," I said plainly. "I just want to live in peace." Nancy scoffed. "He's framing us." "Those are your faces in the videos," I said. Barbara snapped, "It's harassment." "No," I replied calmly. "It's documentation." The board deliberated for 10 minutes, then returned with a decision. Effective immediately, Nancy and Barbara would be fined $500 per week for continued nuisance violations until all disruptive behavior ceased. If further damage occurred, legal action would be pursued through the neighborhood's civil clause. Barbara burst into tears. Nancy stood and yelled, "This entire HOA is a joke. You're all siding with a maniac." "No," Mr. Linwood said, folding his hands. "We're siding with sanity." It didn't stop there. Emboldened by the decision, several neighbors stepped forward with their own stories. A teenager who claimed Nancy tried to bribe him to egg my house. A middle-aged couple who found tire tracks on their front garden after refusing to sell cookies during the HOA fundraiser. Even Ms. Fleming, bless her heart, said Barbara once yelled at her for pruning a bush too loudly. The board opened a formal file. The floodgates were open. That week, code enforcement showed up at the Karen house. Turns out they had a laundry list of violations. An illegal fire pit, overgrown weeds, an abandoned mattress in the backyard, and a rusting swing set held together with rope and wishful thinking. $2,000 in fines. Due immediately. Their expressions when the officer handed them the notice? Priceless. I watched from across the street, leaned against my mailbox, sipping iced tea. Nancy tore up the paper and screamed at the officer. Barbara threatened to sue. Neither of them got anywhere. 2 days later, they tried to start a GoFundMe. Wronged by HOA tyrants, the title read. They asked for $10,000 to repair damages inflicted by a cruel and vindictive neighbor. They received $12. 6 of them came from anonymous donations labeled for new driving glasses and maybe don't hit mailboxes. Their SUV, still undrivable, was finally towed off their property when the HOA cited them again for non-functional vehicles on display. Watching the Queen barge get pulled away was poetic. The tow truck driver even waved to me as he passed. The final blow came from a place I didn't expect, Nancy's job. Apparently, one of her coworkers saw the viral video and forwarded it to their HR department. Turns out Nancy worked as a customer service supervisor for an insurance company. The irony was painful. She was suspended indefinitely pending review for conduct unbecoming. Barbara, who didn't work, responded by spending entire afternoons pacing on their porch, muttering into her phone, and occasionally throwing shade in my direction, sometimes literally, by hurling small objects like sticks, twigs, and once a partially eaten donut. But they had lost. Every weapon in their petty little arsenal had either backfired or been stripped away. What remained were 2 women in wilted floral dresses, watching their world collapse around them, one HOA fine at a time. And me? I finally had peace. One morning, as I walked out to get the mail, I noticed something odd. Silence. No yelling. No engines revving. No threats or giggling or syrupy perfume clouds wafting through the air. Just the breeze, the chirp of birds, the hum of distant sprinklers. I touched the mailbox, solid, cold steel, unmoved, unbothered, unbroken. And in that moment, I knew the war was over, at least for now. Because just before I turned to go back inside, I spotted Barbara across the street again. She was watching me, not with anger, not with fear, with calculation. And I realized something. People like them don't forget. They don't let go. They don't admit defeat. They retreat. They fester. They stew. But they're always looking for a way back in. I took one last look at her, nodded, and walked inside. Because if they ever tried again, I wouldn't just be ready. I'd be waiting. If you enjoyed this wild showdown with the Karen twins, make sure to like the video. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe for more cinematic stories where justice always gets served. And hit that notification bell so you never miss the next chaotic tale.